Hello, I'm Roger Bisbee, back doing another one of my series on the building of London, and there can't be many people that visit London who don't happen into this Trafalgar Square at some time. It looks a very impressive sight, but it wasn't so impressive years ago when they were building it, because this lovely looking place was beset with wrangles, disagreements, delays, you name it. It was a classic case of a building job gone wrong. Now, when they started, this whole area was King Henry VIII's stables. It was a mews, and it was where he used to keep his hunting birds when they were molting. This whole area was full of stables and ramshackle buildings. The stables remained until there was a big scheme to clear it all out the way. It's headed up by John Nash, and they had this grand plan for London to make it more like continental cities. So John Nash, no sooner had he got his feet under the table, he died. A lot of architects who were looking to make a name for themselves clamoured to take over this project. They didn't really know what to call it. They were going to call it King William IV Square, but eventually they hit upon the idea of Trafalgar Square to commemorate our great victory over the French and the Spanish, headed up by Lord Nelson, who obviously now sits there at the top of the column. But even that, once they decided that they wanted a square, and they thought, well, we've got to commemorate Nelson in some way, and there were lots of different ideas put forward. They had a competition, they had over 100 entries, and not one of them was impressive enough to go with. They held another competition. Even then they had all kinds of bizarre suggestions. A great big globe standing on water. Bestriding the globe would be Admiral Nelson. Top of the world, ma. That idea was rejected, and they came up with a column, not because they particularly liked the column. It was really just the best of a bad bunch. So there was the column, and down below we had these depicting Nelson's victories, and there he is lying there on the deck of the HMS Victory. A lot of people standing around doing nothing. They're not administering first aid or any kind of CPR on him. Bit of a shame. England expects every man will do his duty. That was the phrase, that was what he was supposed to have uttered. The great cheeky bit about these actually is that they were cast out of melted down French cannons. So once we'd had the victory and we'd seized their weapons, they were melted down to make these all around Nelson's column. Victories that it depicts here are Trafalgar, obviously, Cape Vincent, Copenhagen, and the Nile. We had the column, then what are we going to put around the column? And it was decided that we were going to put some lions around the column, because everybody loves a lion. The lions were sculpted and designed, if you like. He did the original sketches for these. Edward Landseer, the artist, the one who was famous for painting a lot of horses and dogs and doing sculptures of animals, he was given the job of creating these lions. I think each one is identical, so he only had to do one and then have them knocked out. He wasn't really sure what a lion looked like. He needed something to work from. He needed a life model. So he ordered a lion from Regent's Park Zoo to be sent to his studio as a life model, except of course that it was dead. He got a dead lion sent down. Very handy. And he had this dead lion in his studio so that he could copy it. But the thing started to stink, it started to decay, and he had to get rid of it. It was causing a health hazard. So he managed to do quite a lot of the sketches, but he didn't quite finish them. And if you look at the paws of this lion, you can see that they're a bit of a fudge, actually. They're nothing like a lion's paw. A very poor example of a paw, if you like. The reason for that is that he just took the rough drawing, if you like, from a domestic cat. So nice work, Edward. But anyway, there they are, the lions. And when I was a kid, you could climb all over these lions, sit on the back, nobody bothered you. I mean, that was what lions were for. There are now over 50 rules governing what you're allowed to do in this square. So no sitting on the lions, no flying a kite, no transmitting loud music. How they get away with that busking up there, they got express permission from the mayor to do it on a strict rotation basis. That's outside the National Gallery. All these rules, there's a rule against lying down here, because back in the day when George Orwell was writing Down and Out in London and Paris, and that's a book about homeless people after the war, disabled servicemen tramping around, nowhere to live, no job after the First World War. There were about 400 people every night bedding down in this square. how did they solve that? They solved that by saying you're not allowed to lie down in the square, and it became an offence to do it. So all those people had to go. I think it's a bit more relaxed now about things. I'm not quite sure what would happen if you laid down, but certainly one of the rules was that you weren't allowed to use any kind of recording devices. In other words, what I'm doing now wouldn't be legal. If you try to stop people using their phones to take selfies or little videos now, I think you'd have a bit of a struggle on your hands. They certainly don't allow any swimming in the fountain, but again, that's one of those things. If it gets really hot, if it gets to 40 degrees in London, you will see loads and loads of people lying in those fountains trying to keep cool. And you'll also see them on New Year's Eve, because on New Year's Eve, every nut job in London comes along and jumps in the fountains. Beautiful sight now along here, along outside the National Gallery, but it wasn't always like that. This whole bit around the top here was traffic. So there was traffic going all the way around in front of the National Gallery. And to get into the square, you had to cross the road and take your life in your hands. It's improved it a great lot. I mean, that's one of the improvements. I think that we've got to give them 10 out of 10 for doing that. And these new steps that they put down have meant that there's a nice place for people to rest, eat an ice cream and watch the world go by. Doesn't seem to be a rule against guys juggling with fire. Perhaps when they devised those 50 rules, it wasn't even a thing. Must be a hard business now, because at one point people used to throw coins into a busker's box or hat, and now cash has almost disappeared, so people have to tap a card on their mobile phone, and people are less inclined to do that because they're not really sure how much it's going to take. It says £2 a tap, but who knows. Here's another rule: don't feed the pigeons. This place used to have loads and loads of pigeons, and there are hardly any left. Not feeding them has actually got rid of them, but also I think they used a few contraceptives in the bird feed. They actually put the pigeons on the pill. So we got Nelson's column, and then it was decided that maybe what we also needed was some statues of the great and the good around here. And this is one of the statues. There's another one on the other side, on the south side of the square, and they were fairly straightforward. I don't think there were many arguments about who should go on those statues. Havelock, Henry Havelock, who fought in India. A brave campaign, he said. I wonder who he was fighting. Your valour will not be forgotten fighting the Indians. Well, Gandhi paid to that, didn't he? Now here we have a statue that was actually going somewhere else entirely, and this is George IV. He's got quite a lot of presence in London. Incidentally, there's only one statue to Henry VIII in the whole of London. I wonder if you know where that is. Answers below. So there he is, George IV. Now, he wasn't supposed to be there, really. They stuck him there because they had this plinth, and they thought, all right, we'll park him there because we're building Marble Arch. And they were building Marble Arch outside the newly built Buckingham Palace. And they built Marble Arch. They thought, we'll stick him on top of Marble Arch. He'd be happy up there. But when they built Marble Arch outside Buckingham Palace, it wasn't very successful because it hampered the entrance to the palace. It was the wrong arch in the wrong place, really. So what they did is they moved Marble Arch to its present position, which is at the top of Park Lane. And having built it outside Buckingham Palace and then moved it all the way up Constitution Hill, Park Lane, and reconstructed it stone by stone at the top of Park Lane there, they really didn't have the inclination or the energy to move this fella and his horse. I mean, that's a fair old weight, isn't it? As a builder, you're a little bit challenged by doing a job like that. So they thought, you know what? We've all lost interest in it now. The whole thing, really, that's the theme of the whole development of Trafalgar Square, is people losing interest in it. Even after the fountains were installed, they fired up the fountains and they leaked. And so, being London, it was hard to get hold of a plumber. And when they did get hold of a plumber, it cost them an arm and a leg. Sorry, Horatio, poor taste, that one. Metaphorically, it cost them an arm and a leg to get the fountains up and running, to get the leaks cured, get that going, but they still hadn't got the paving slabs down. We got 4 plinths. Those 2 are taken. That one's, he had a temporary parking spot, but this one, the 4th plinth, nobody could decide who was going to go on there. Cecil Rhodes was spoken about one time, as was Churchill. Churchill is now elsewhere, he's down the road. They were going to put Churchill up there, they were going to put other people, but again, so one of these things where they just couldn't agree. It seems that everything about this square was beset with this indecision and prevarication and changing their mind, redoing things, you name it. So the 4th plinth was It was decided eventually that they should keep the fourth plinth and just have a rolling exhibition of modern art there. Modern art, as we know, could be any old crap that somebody decides to put up there. Anything that Charles Saatchi is willing to pay £1 million for is considered modern art. So is that modern art? What is that all about? I haven't got a clue. This is brilliant, isn't it? This is absolutely what it's about, the Mayor of London. This is made up of plaster casts of the faces of hundreds of transgender, non-binary and gender non-conforming people. Each mould is created by applying plaster directly to the participant's face, and it retains traces of skin, hair and eyelashes. Erosion will eventually transform the material slowly over time, i.e. transgender, do you get it? They won't be there that long. I've got to say, this is a rolling exhibition. This is not staying here forever. A transgender woman was found murdered in Mexico. This is a tribute to her, and it raises awareness of their violence and abuse faced by so many transgender, non-binary and gender non-conforming people globally. I wonder if anybody's even aware of what this sculpture is about. Have you got any idea what that sculpture is up there?
Just going to go up and have a look.
Oh.
Famous people's faces.
They're not famous people. But I'm just interested to know because
we've just seen it. We'll go and have a look at it.
Yeah, sometimes I can't work out whether it's the change, the holding. Oh, did you?
They're all different people's faces.
Yeah, we'll go and have a look at it because it's very interesting. I didn't know what it was, and now I do. I don't know.
Well, I hope you're right.
Now I know I'm going to come in for a lot of flack from a lot of people, and I've got to say I've got absolutely nothing against transgender people. I've got nothing against anybody wanting to do what they want, so long as it doesn't frighten the horses. But it seems to me that all they're doing all the time is rubbing our noses in everything. People say the woke culture or whatever. I think it's having the opposite effect. I think when I saw a bloke dressed as a woman years ago, I was not shocked by it. I didn't worry about it. I thought it's okay, you know, it's like everything. It doesn't worry me. It's their business. But you have to make it my business. That's me, that's enough ranting. See what this square does here? It causes dissent. It causes dissatisfaction. You walk in here and you come out with a grievance. So there we are, that's looking down Whitehall towards Parliament Square, and it was called Whitehall because the stones were white, Portland stone and various other places they got some stone from. It was actually all burned down by a couple of fires, but one of them was a servant girl drying some washing next to a coal fire or brazier or something like that. And the washing caught fire, burned the whole palace down. So it's fairly safe to say that she probably got the sack. I mean, nowadays you wouldn't, obviously. Nowadays you go before a tribunal, plead your case, and they would give you compensation for unfair dismissal. So it was only an accident, it could have happened to anybody. But it couldn't happen to a king, could it? Because kings never did their washing or their drying. This whole place, this whole Trafalgar Square has been beset with problems, controversy all the way down the line. Should it be Nelson? What should Nelson stand on? How far up should he be out of harm's way so he can't be toppled into the fountain as soon as somebody disagrees with him? So there's protests. Whoever you put on these pediments is going to be bad history. There's going to be things you can find out about them. I mean, they might have put Jimmy Savile on the fourth plinth at one time, you know, so there's that kind of thing, isn't it? That we uncover things about people that we don't like, and then we decide we want to take the statue down. So Black Lives Matter, they wanted to take Nelson off the column, not because he participated in slavery, but because he wasn't against it. Well, very few people were against it in that point, and even the people in Africa, the people selling their brothers into slavery, they weren't against slavery, they made a good living out of it. So you can go back and you can look at anything through modern eyes and judge it accordingly, but the statues are kind of there, they're permanent, and that may be the problem. 100 years after their death, maybe we look back on them and we think they weren't the heroes that we thought they were. So what do? We keep toppling statues, we keep defacing them, chucking pots of paint over them to show our disapproval. So maybe what we don't need is statues on a permanent basis. Maybe what we need to do is just stick them up there, have a few years, and when they fall out of favour, we take them down and we put somebody else up. How about that for a solution? So as the sun goes down on Trafalgar Square and the British Empire, as it were, just one further thought. This seems to me to be constantly undergoing change, and if Hitler had succeeded in invading England and had won the Second World War, he did actually have plans drawn up on paper to remove Nelson from that column and take Nelson to Berlin. And what was he going to do with the column? Well, he was going to stick a statue of himself up there, lording it over London. And if that were the case, we would all now probably be speaking German. So all I've got left to say is, auf Wiedersehen, Pet.